Check.
Go straight over. Look at him going after me.
Here we have the first full contact karate fight in the United States held in Los Angeles, California in 1970. Joe Louis is fighting for the heavyweight championship. It's against Greg Ohm Baines of Fresno, California, formerly a football player with the Fresno Bulldogs. The commentary will be with Joe Louis and Jay Will. So what do you remember about this, Joe?
I remember I didn't have any sparring partners about a month before this fight, so I basically trained by myself. I was working out down at Chuck Norris's karate school to get in shape for this. I'd go down every morning at 7 o'clock. Bob Wall gave me the keys to the school, let me train down there on a heavy bag. And what people don't realize is just before this match, I had already fought a 3-round bout with Chuck Lovin, so I was a little tired coming into this. And at the time, I was working with Bruce Lee, so you see a combination. I'll switch from a Jeet Kune Do style when I have my right side forward.
Right here.
Yes, when I'm working is a front hand strike to the face and then come back around with a left hook. Ultimately, I got him. I mean, a right hook. Ultimately, I get him with the right hook. In those days, we carried our hands kind of low because people weren't that proficient at hitting people in the head. This is Steve Armstrong up there refereeing from Tacoma, Washington.
We'll also notice here that there was no equipment on the feet. They were barefoot or wore shoes. And I'm sure there were no shin guards.
In those days, there were no rules. They just said,
see if you can knock them out.
Well, basically, they just said show up. So I wore shoes because I was working with the sneakers on when I was working with Bruce Lee, and Greg Baines chose to show up without the sneakers. And they were pushing this black militant number before the bout there a little bit, and there was a little distaste in the audience about that nonsense. But
where was this fight actually held?
This is down in Long Beach.
At the Long Beach Arena?
January 17th or February 17th, 1970. Long Beach Sports Arena. It's where Ed Parker holds his international championships quite often. Greg was in pretty good shape. He weighed about 199 in this particular match, and I'd gotten really thin. I'd dropped down to perhaps around 192, 193 before the fight, and probably after the fight I'd weighed about 188, I think.
I believe right here is we're getting close to when you drilled him pretty good here.
I was catching with a couple of right hooks. I don't think his chin was that strong. Typical of most black belts in those days. They had the big, thick bodies. As you can see, Mr. Baines had been lifting weights quite a bit. But I don't think his chin was too strong.
He has a football player kind of build with a lot of bulk.
This is Jim Harrison working my corner from Kansas City. Incidentally, he was one of the first full contact fighters knocked out the one time Victor Moore down in Dallas, Texas in the second round, after the doctor stitched him up between rounds.
Beginning round 2. Tell us what you're doing here, Joe.
I'm getting ready to kill him. No, I'm just trying to feint with a lead hand, and bend forward, come in, smothers punches, smothers kicks, and try to catch him with the right hook. I like to work low kicks in those days, keep my head down. That was typical of my style. Some people have commented about the way I was built. I did lift weights when I was a teenager, and from my weightlifting days.
Right there, look at his knees. As a referee, I can see right now that he's out of it.
See, the reason I backed off was because I thought he's playing possum, lying up against the ropes there and acting like he was unconscious. And
well, after all the experience you have now, you could tell by the way his legs were responding to that hit.
When I hit him with the right hook, I felt like I broke my forearm. I hit him so hard. There's no way he was going to get up in time.
So you felt the jolt going through his head, huh?
Oh yeah, the people told me after the fight in the dressing room he didn't even know where he was.
Well, you can tell that when he walks over here tries to walk over to congratulate you.
As a matter of fact, after 4 years of
Who's
fighting,
that in the red jacket there?
that was old Pat Burleson down in Fort Worth, Texas. That was the first time I ever jumped up after winning a fight in my life. People were kind of surprised to see me jump up. You can't tell it, but I did get a standing ovation. There was a number of film stars out there in the audience at the time. I remember Dan Blocker from the old Bonanza series was down there.
Look, you see Greg Baines really is not completely in control of his faculties right here.
I think he's waiting for round 3 or something.
Yeah.
But I think he got in a car accident or something after this. But at that time, I considered him personally the best heavyweight in the United States at that time. So I felt lucky to beat him. Incidentally, I was the one that bought both those gloves that we're wearing.
Both his and yours?
Yep. That fight, plus I bought 40 ringside seats for all of my private students. So that money, that particular fight, I lost quite a bit of money. Let's hope Lee Faulkner doesn't get drifted, as he was the promoter of that particular event. As a matter of fact, the night when we fought, I told him I would not do any more point tournaments, that I only wanted to fight full contact, and that's how this particular bout came about.
Well, now we're going to see a heavyweight bout here with you and Ross Scott in Atlantic City. What was the date of that?
This was, I came out of retirement the first time. I hadn't been doing any training, hadn't been doing any sparring. I didn't think any of the karate people had gotten proficient enough with their hands. What I'm doing here is just sort of move around. He's staying pretty much in a karate stance and just trying to keep his hands up. My problem with this particular match was I didn't throw my... there were no rules for this fight. I'm sitting in the dressing room waiting to come out for the fight, and Ross Scott's corner people come in and demand a 6-kick per round rule, which I broke, and subsequently defaulted a fight there as a result. And
you also had some problems with your shoulder in this fight.
Real big problems. They still hurt to this day. I refused to get an operation on my shoulder. I threw a looping right hook in the second round, and my shoulder went out, and it went out on me 5 times in this particular fight. And I think back in the days of Mike Stone when he dislocated his shoulder fighting Vic Moore. Matter of fact, it was this particular night he fought Vic Moore. And just before, I mean not this particular fight, the fight with Greg Baines, he dislocated his shoulder and he walked out of the ring. And of course, remember Sonny Liston dislocating his shoulder and refused to come off the bench. But my corner people always told me about there was only one rule when you're fighting, that is never quit. And I said as long as I got one arm, I'll keep fighting.
Well, having wrecked a motorcycle myself and fractured and dislocated my shoulder, I cannot imagine continuing to fight with a dislocated shoulder.
It's pretty painful, but once you get into that psychic mode, you get sort of a fluid state of consciousness, you just don't feel any pain. He was real awkward for me to fight. He'd start throw a front kick, and I'd sort of duck, try to smother it, and his knee would come up and hit me square in the face. And I ended up with, I think, 2 black eyes out of this particular fight.
Well, I know you having refereed Ross a couple of times myself. In fact, he lost both times I refereed him when he fought Demetrius Edwards.
That was the old Oak Tree Edwards.
Right, Demetrius Oak Tree Edwards. I noticed that in the ring right there is where...
There's an example where he starts to throw a kick, and I try to block it and smother it, and I catch the knee right on the nose, and that doesn't feel too good.
I know that he doesn't look like it, but when he throws those kicks, when you're in the ring with, you can tell there's a lot of power and momentum behind those kicks.
I sparred him years ago in Dayton, Ohio. Glenn Keeney used to bring him to my seminars when he was just a green belt, and he was a pretty tough old boy back then. And basically that's how he won his fights. He was just stronger than his opponents. He didn't beat him with technique. We're often taught when you go into a fight, you concentrate on three things. Number one, you want good technique. Good technique will help you begin the fight. It'll help get you into the fight. In other words, it'll help you start the fight. And number two, you need that what they call guts. In other words, that's good physical conditioning, good stamina. In other words, what keeps you in the fight, what will enable you to stay in the fight. There I dislocated my shoulder, taking me over to the corner and see if they can put it back in. And number three, in Okinawa I was taught one rule: never quit. I don't believe there's any such thing as winning or losing a fight. You either finish it or you don't. And since you can't kill the person in front of you, how can you really tell who won the fight? So the third thing you want to concentrate on is what they call heart. And very few people know what I mean when I say put your heart into it. And heart is what you need to actually finish a fight.
I remember watching this tape before, and you hit him one time. I don't remember with what, but he actually spun around 360
It
degrees.
was a left hook, I think, in the fifth round.
You've hit him some pretty good shots here.
My problem was my right arm was dead on me, and it was just basically hanging by the end of the fight. I couldn't block with it or anything, and I think the last, I've never seen this tape before, last couple of rounds I couldn't even throw the right hand. There was a couple of photographers who would shoot pictures of him throwing a punch at my head, and as I would jerk my head to the side, my hair would flare off. And then I remember seeing in some magazines some captions underneath the photograph: Ross Scott hitting Joe Louis. He never hit me once with a punch, but he got me with a couple of knees in the face. See, that's why I would advise young fighters, if you're going into the fight, then my shoulder goes out again.
Yeah, you hit him with a right hand and it went out.
Yeah, I shouldn't have been throwing that right hand. If I were smart, I just should have walked out of the ring, but I'm not a quitter. That's my trainer, Joey Orbilo, in there from Long Beach, California.
Well, I think obviously completing this fight in that kind of pain with a dislocated shoulder, having experienced that myself, but never during a fight, is a real testimony to your courage.
Well, the problem is it messed my arm up for life. I can still only punch with like 90% of my speed now, but that's still pretty good. I just never wanted a doctor cutting a hole in my body, leaving a scar on my shoulder. I've seen a lot of people have their shoulders operated on. Basically what I'm trying to do here is move a lot, give him a moving target, make it difficult for him to hit me. I didn't want to waste time blocking the kicks. I was just trying to move and make him miss. Move, make him miss, trying to slip. Trying to draw him into the corner, come out with a couple left hooks. I do remember one thing his corner people were telling him during the fight: just keep your hands up, keep your hands up. They tried to tell him, stay on the outside, don't try to outbox me. In those days, I don't think there was any karate man alive that could outbox me, because I had been boxing for quite a while, working out at Long Beach Boxing Center.
Seaside Gym?
Yeah, Seaside Gym.
I remember that.
And once in a while I'll go to the Main Street Gym, go over there and look at Hoover Street Gym, and over there at the Teamsters Gym, but I predominantly worked out down at the Seaside Gym down in Long Beach, California.
I remember going down there with you one time, and there was a
I think
big
my shoulder
black guy.
went out again. They went
Yeah.
all that checking.
It was a big black guy. He was a challenger, a contender, one of the heavyweight contenders who who came in to work out, and you ended up working out with him for a while. And that was the first time I had seen you with someone with boxing skills, and it was very impressive.
Well, Mondo Ramos, I think, was the lightweight.
Right there, 360-degree, spun him around.
Well, see, if my right hand had been available or accessible when he spun around after the left hook, I would have come back with my shoulder goes out again, I guess. 5 times is pretty painful.
I can imagine.
And I think on 2 occasions when it went out, it popped back in before I was able to get assistance. But
I know what.
Thing is, if you maintain that poise and that composure, and execute what we call a good psychological judgment when you're out there fighting. People don't really realize that you're in that pain, and it keeps your opponent psychologically off balance, so his momentum, his psychological intensity doesn't build against you. You start acting like you're tired, like, I didn't train for this particular fight, I just didn't think anybody could stand more than 2 rounds from it. As a matter of fact, up until this particular fight, I'd knocked out everybody I'd ever fought inside of 2 rounds. And old Ross had a pretty good jaw, and he just didn't want to go down. As a matter of fact, I think he told me before the fight, all he wanted to do, my shoulder's out again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll see if the referee can pop it back in for me. He told me before the fight, all he wanted, he said, I know I'm not going to win, all I want to do is look good.
This is in Atlantic City, New Jersey. What casino was this in? Do you remember?
It was at the convention center there, right on the boardwalk. So he could come in with the kicks pretty good. He just had no success with the hands. He needed a year or 2 to work on his hands, and I think subsequently he went down to a boxing gym and learned how to work his hands fairly well. There he's just pretty much slapping.
I know he ended up, in fact, in Los Angeles working out and training out there for a while.
He had a pretty good jaw, but when you got a dislocated right shoulder, it's very difficult to get the proper torque. And you're, see there, I'm slapping now with that left hook because I can't torque because of the sore right shoulder. Plus, I got to admit, I was pretty tired there since I didn't train for this fight. You notice I'm not kicking a great deal. There's not a lot of sting and bite on my kicks, but I was surprised he was still standing. Might remind you, if you any young fighters coming up, don't ever go into a fight without training, because that audience will pick up on it, and they'll sure turn against you right in the middle of the fight, and that works against you also.
Mm-hmm.
And you start going back to your corner, and your corner man says, well, Joe, I'll meet you in the dressing room after the fight. I'm not going to be here at the end of the next round. That was one of Joe Bill's old pet peeves. He did that, I think, at the end of round 5 in this particular fight. He said, Joe, I'm going to go back to the dressing room. I'll meet you after the fight.
Good old Joe Bill.
I think my shoulder's out, and I'm just trying to cover, waiting for it to pop back in, hopefully.
Well, he has a lot of power in his kicks, you can tell. Just the mass behind his legs, getting them going.
Well, he played football, and I think he told me he could do a 600-pound squat at one time, which is pretty powerful. I imagine that's a half squat. I don't think any karate man do a full 600-pound squat. I once did
That's
a
Joe Bill talking to the referee.
450-pound front squat, but I never tried it on the backside. Somebody punched me in the center of my back when I was in the Marine Corps, and I quit doing the Olympic lifts to save my back. Now those are what you call desperation shots. You can tell when someone's desperate, and I think I was thinking about the party after the fight here and saying, what am I doing out here? In other words, now the karate community is pretty much using my reputation. I had established a sport by now, and I'd gotten it on national television in 1974 in the wide world of entertainment. It played in about a third of the world, and I turned down some film contracts and stuff, and now I'm making a comeback here. I don't know why I did it. It certainly wasn't for the money or the glory.
Yeah.
As you can see, there's nothing glamorous about what we're doing out there, but you notice my right hand is fairly dead at this point. It's just hanging. I remember looking at my right arm from the elbow down, it was just numb. And I couldn't move well with his kicks anymore, and my right arm was just taking a beating at that point.
Yeah, about now, I guess you're probably thinking, when is this fight going to be over with?
I'm sitting here now watching this. First time I ever seen this tape. I do remember, the reason I remember this, I'm sitting here going, how did they give him this fight when I'm watching how many times I'm hitting him?
Right.
And then, this is in the Philadelphia area, and I went down to Joe Frazier's gym at the time when Joe Frazier was the heavyweight world boxing champion, and met his family and watched him work out with Dwayne Bobbitt and some of the other guys. And Joe Frazier came up to me and put his arms around me and hit me on the chest and said, "You've got a real good body. I'm glad to see you." He sent his family down to, they're sitting ringside, and Muhammad Ali sent 6 of his spies, so to speak, down to watch me. And they came up after the fight and said, I remember one of them said, "You whipped that boy. I don't understand how they gave him the fight, but that's just the way the karate rules were in those days." This is the day before the fight, in the same ring. Yeah, that's me and Bill Wallace just sparring for a couple of rounds. And
Several rounds.
Wallace told me, "Joe, you got to keep your right hand up. You're open for left hooks." And I'm thinking, yeah, but Ross Scott doesn't throw any left hooks. Wallace didn't like to punch in those days, so. He pretty much stayed on there.
This fight here is, in what year was this?
This is back in 75.
Here in 75, and 15 years later, you guys were fighting again
Yeah, incidentally,
in Nevada.
he and I were on the first time full contact ever been nationally telecast in 1974 on ABC, and again in 1990, August 6th, in Lake Tahoe. We were on the card for the first time full contact karate had ever been on pay-per-view TV. So Bill and I have got a couple of firsts in the record books. We're the first full contact world champions. We're the first ones to put it back on national television, and we're the first times to ever put it on pay-per-view TV. So, and we're still hanging in there. And what's strange is even to this day, we're talking now 1990, the end of 1990, whenever the boxing community, I was showing Bill how to slip and slide punches there. Whenever the boxing community comes to the karate community to get somebody to fight a professional boxer, they don't go to the current fighters. They always come to see me or Bill Wallace. As a matter of fact, a couple of years ago, remember down in Miami when Bill Wallace did that 3-round exhibition with Tommy Hearns.
That was in Miami?
Yes. I didn't see it, but it's my understanding that Bill looked really good against Tommy Hearns, and I talked to some boxing people in the boxing community to get their side of the story, and they said that that's the way Tommy Hearns and Hearns' family passed the word back down, that Bill looked really good against him. In other words, you take that to mean Bill probably got the better of him.
Mm-hmm.
Bill said he did get hit with a couple of good jabs. Tommy Hearns had a really good jab. See, Bill and I both used to wrestle, so we like to tie each other up. We like to get inside, and he would like to do like a single leg dive or a double leg dive right there, and maybe a fireman's carry, throw me down or something. And I just want to throw a chokehold on him, but we're trying to bridge the gap here between point fighting and full contact. You still see back there in the early 70s, most of us carried our hands down kind of low, but it was an outside game at that time, and most people weren't that proficient on the inside with the hands. But even then, we both had pretty good kicks and excellent body movement. Look at me complimenting myself. Bill was exceptionally good at bridging the gap and also maintaining distance. He's still, even at this day now, he's 45 years old today, going on 46, and he can still move as well as any other black belt in the world so far as his footwork goes.
Well, you're, how much are you weighing here in this fight?
I'm in the high 190s.
And Bill was about 168?
I used to weigh 164 when he competed, 163 to 168. he's starting to learn how to work with his hands here. I had trained him to fight Joe Corley for about 6 weeks. I went down to Memphis, Tennessee, and taught him how to throw a left hook and to keep his hands up. See, Bill's a converted orthodox fighter. He's left-handed, so he's got his left side forward. Actually, he should be fighting southpaw with his right side forward. But he's using some of Bruce Lee's, unconsciously using some of Bruce Lee's principles here, putting the power side forward. See that little wrestling spin out there he did, and he steps out and slaps him. I thought we'd only gone a couple rounds that day. Again, this is the first time I've ever seen this tape.
This is several rounds.
This is a good piece of vintage if anybody would like to have a copy of this. What people don't realize is you're looking at something that was shot here in 1975, and at that time, not to be bragging, but there's no full contact fighters who could stay in the ring with Wallace Rye. Could pretty much eat them alive. And can't even tell I'm out of shape, can you? Well,
no, you're concealing it pretty well. Now we are in the Washington, D.C. Hilton in the basement during the 1971 D.C. Nationals.
Well, it's 1970.
1970, okay.
United States National Championships. That's Q.R. Kim refereeing my first match. I had a nasty situation here. That they made all the black belts turn their gi tops inside out so you couldn't see what school they were from. I thought that was kind of ridiculous. And obviously that was the promoters telling the competitors there was a widespread mess as far as the political scene goes up there. So we walked in kind of a hornet's nest there.
Not unusual.
So we refused to turn our gis inside out. So I was not invited to come back and defend my title this year, and I took that as a put down. Strangely enough, 2 years before this, I had been there with Bruce Lee, and they seeded me every year defending my title, and here I'm defending my title the 5th year, and they refused to let me do so. So they told me I would have to fight all the way through the eliminations. So they were determined to get me out of there. They tried to get me out of there the 2 previous years, and they just didn't have the competition to do so. So here I think I bit the dust. I think my second match, some guy waved his foot at my head, and they gave him the match.
I remember he kicked you on the shoulder. You'll see it quite clearly here. Don't remember
But it
his
didn't matter
name.
how many times I would score a punch, they would refuse to call my
Right.
point. So I guess some people came up to me and said they'd heard some rumors that Joe, they were going to get you out of there that year. Politics was getting really bad in the martial arts nationwide in the late 60s and early 70s, and things. That's one reason why I was glad about full contact coming in. Would get rid of all this riffraff and this nonsense of somebody waving a foot and waving a hand at your head, and they run off and say, "Yeah, I beat Joe Louis." But
Here's the guy that you lost to. I remember him kicking you on the shoulder.
yeah, they just would not call points. But I was willing to fight from the ground up. It didn't matter, you know. Alan Steen pulled that same nonsense on me and Chuck Norris in 1968. Chuck and I were invited down as guests at the tournament. We got down there, and Alan Steen sort of made Chuck Norris compete. So I walk in, and Alan Steen walks up to me and says, "Well, Joe, Chuck Norris decided to compete in the tournament. What are you going to do, back down?" And I said, "No, I'll compete." So we had to compete from the ground level up. Then we got to the international championships, and Chuck and I were supposed to be seated in the international championships in 1968, and Ed Parker refused to let us be seated, and he made us compete from the ground up. And coincidentally, Chuck and I ended up fighting for the grand championship that night. So we blew everybody away in spite of the fact that the promoters are always against us. I guess the young fighters still have that nonsense to go through these days as well. Not to make this commentary distract from the match.
Well, that was the advantage for me at that time. I was not. No one really knew who I was, and I drew a guy by the name of Chuck Love and didn't know who he was, and he didn't know who I was, and fortunately, I snuck by him. I remember you coming over and saying, "Do you know who you just beat?" There he is, kicked you in the shoulder, and I gave him a point for that.
Yeah.
And he won the fight.
Well,
I remember you saying to me, "Do you know who you just beat?" And I said, "No." I said, "Well, that was one of Alan Steen's top guys." And I said, "Well, I'm glad you didn't tell me until it was over with."
is that the watermelon slice where the
Yeah.
guy got 26 stitches in his spine?
I don't know about
That's
that.
not the one, huh?
No, I don't think so. This is the USKA Grand National Heavyweight title fight in Anderson, Indiana. I'm thinking this is 1971. And you are fighting Victor Moore here. With Bill Dimitri's the head referee, and Danny Pye is there in the black karate uniform.
71?
I think it was
So I was-
71.
I won it in 69 and 1970, United States. USKA Grand Nationals, right?
Right.
So I was a defending champion. I can't remember if they seeded me in this or not. All the seeding stuff, I think, came from tennis. They didn't used to seed black belts in the old days. Matter of fact, I didn't know what that word meant, seed. I had to go look up in the dictionary. I still don't think it's in there.
You was out there planting corn, didn't you? You can tell when you
This is-
clash.
This is one fight I don't remember. I fought this kid 4 times. I got him 3 out of 4 times. At one time, I remember my buddy Skipper Mullins and Alan Steen gave him a point against me down in San Antonio Hemisphere Fair or something. It was some sort of a rink-dink world championship down there. I won 7 different world championships, and come to find out, not a single one of them ever counted in record books. Shows you how organized karate was back in those days. Especially the one up in Chicago in 1966, that Count Dante thing. Robert Trias made him a 3rd-degree black belt, in, I guess, the Kempo style that they were in. And although
That was Okinawan style.
well, Trias was Shorinri,
Right.
but Dante used to call that stuff Kempo. That's what he was doing. And next thing I know, he's Master Count Dante, you know.
John Keenan was his real name.
Yeah, John Keehan. He was a hairdresser. I remember watching him break bricks. He'd lay 2 bricks flat against the ground. He wouldn't raise them up, and he'd hit the top of them, break both of them. He had hands like a woman's, you know. I used to talk about how his hands look. I said, how could this guy hurt anybody with hands like that? And, but he sure could slap through those bricks. I just wish people wouldn't hokey up karate with all this nonsense carnival act stuff. Well, I actually threw a high kick there, didn't
Yeah, it kind of surprised me too.
I? Well, I probably slipped.
Wonder how that happened.
Well, this is how tournaments looked in the old days. There was a lot of stationary fighting. People kept the hands down. You didn't see a lot of combinations like kick, punch, kick, punch, kick, punch.
Oh, gee, you're real surprised. You stepped out of the ring there.
Well,
huh?
they're warning me for stepping out of the ring, I
Mhm.
think. I'm telling the judge to shut up, I think.
You nod.
I think that's my buddy Danny Pye over there on the right, and
Bill Dimitri and the white gi.
White Gi. Both of them gained some weight since those days. Look at that mop of hair I had in those days.
Yeah, you had the hair.
I think this kid I'm fighting weighs about 300 pounds today. So I guess, a lot of these black belts just don't stay in shape. They get the black belts or they win a title and they quit. Now, he's got that Count Dante goatee. That's probably why it took me as long to beat him.
Yeah, it was a real mystifying, wasn't
What
it?
I like, though, is all those other fights going on. You know, it seems like we've captivated the audience's eye out there. Everybody seems to be watching the fight.
Well, this is the grand championship fight here, so this is probably
This one?
Yeah, this is
One of the grand champions.
this is the heavyweight title fight. This is the only ring going right now.
You didn't have to say that like that, Jay. It makes my comment totally invalid now. Didn't you say at the beginning of this tape this is expert commentary?
Yeah. No, I don't know if I say anything about expert.
You know, it's one of the
This is
habits I used to
commentary.
have in those old days. I'd take my left hand and pull my gi pants up. I don't know why I didn't just wear a shorter gi. See how ripped it was underneath there? They taught us in Okinawa, if your gi gets ripped or if you get blood stains on it, don't wash the blood stains out and don't sew the gi back up. So I'd always refuse to stitch it back up, and after a while it became a mess. I remember one day somebody grabbed me or something, split my gi slacks, my left side from the end of my foot all the way up to my crotch, and I had to go sew it up then.
Here you are pulling him over to talk, and Glenn Keeney there in the suit coat, a young Glenn Keeney.
That was Mr. Keeney.
Yep.
I'm telling him, give me the match or I'm going to kill him.
And there's some discussion about what was going on here. I'm not quite sure what. There's a clear indication of the strength and power that you had when you grabbed those guys and spin them around.
That was always going for the insurance point. After I would score, I always try to spin around, score one point, even though the judge would say stop, because you don't know what the other judges saw or didn't see. And if you're fighting foreign territory, like, see, all those are USKA people, and I'm fighting at a USKA tournament in their neighborhood, and I come in with a big Tracy patch on my back, and they're not very happy to see me. So you got to protect yourself at all cost. There's politics and everything, regardless of how subtle it is. It's there. There's not so much people out to cheat you. They just make themselves blind, and they just unconsciously don't see your points.
Well, these are rare films, that's for sure. You're not going to see many point fights with Joe Louis.
You're the only one's got a copy of this, but not for long, right?
Now, as strange as it may seem, you are fighting Bill Superfoot Wallace for the Grand Championship title to U.S.
That
Grand
can't be
Nationals.
Bill Wallace. That guy's got hair. Who is that? That's Bill Wallace.
That's
isn't
Bill Wallace.
I think the year before he was getting ready to fight me, and Artie Simmons out of Erie, Ohio,
Pennsylvania.
yeah, got Wallace, and then in 1968, Tom Puppet got Wallace down at the first bout of Atlanta, and because I thought Wallace was the best guy at both these tournaments, but somebody nicked him before I came along. So it was the first time we had an encounter. The problem he and I had against each other, we just couldn't score on each other. He was real quick. Watching. That year he's just starting to develop that backhand. That's called hit and run. He just fired a kick and take off. A lot of times he'd start to move before the kick would get there, and he hit me down on the thigh. I'm going right side forward, trying to neutralize he was trying to work a short side kick to the ribs or a high round kick to the head. He didn't have his punching down too well that day. He threw a left back knuckle and a left hooking punch to the midsection.
Well, that front foot is pretty quick. You can see that.
He was hard to catch. Had exceptionally good, quick footwork. Well, he ran a 100-yard dash under 10 seconds when he was growing up, so I know he was fast. But I see a lot of these guys run these 100-yard dashes in 9.5, 9.6, 9.7, and they can't kick that quick, though. So it's a whole different group of muscles you use when you're kicking. That's why a lot of people don't advise doing road work for kicking skills. Here I'm using some of the Jeet Kune Do stuff, using the rear hand to block the face and keep the front hand free for a scoop punch to the back side, or I'll grab the trap or the forward hand strike, try to double up on the forward hand strike. See, maintain distance exceptionally well. Master in distance. Keep your eye on your opponent and try to stay about 2.5, 3 inches out of range at all times. Trying to make him miss, come back with a counter. and I'm trying to jam his kick and come over the top of the back knuckle. I think Bill and I had a problem in those days too. I think some of the stuff was, not to brag, but so fast the judges actually couldn't see it. This sport definitely needs what they call instant replay, you know what I mean? Definitely needs instant replay. But one thing I like about these tournaments and some of the JK tournaments today, currently today, and the Kyokushinkai and the Ashihara karate guys, these Kubado schools, they don't put the gear on the hand, so you can actually tell if the hand's making contact or not. Some of this foam nonsense they wear these days, they open the hands and let the old limp type wrist just flick over your guard, and they still top you on the head, and if you hear that pad clicking, you still get a point for it.
When I originally shot this film,
Oh, you shot this?
Yeah, I never thought that it would be as important in karate as it is today.
I thought Thomas Jefferson, one of those old guys, shot it so old. Okay.
How about Thomas Edison?
You were around in those days, aren't you?
Yeah, I was.
See, this is the nonsense. Always arguing over what was a point, what wasn't a point. I think there's a hooking right hand, and I crossed my arms, and they gave him a point for it. And he came up to me after the match and said, "Joe, I know I didn't beat you, but how did I look?" I said, "You looked okay." It made me mad. Then my good buddy there puts in the magazine, he beats me.